In this lesson, we are going to learn about functions. Now, what are functions? In programming, we often use code to perform a specific task multiple times. Instead of rewriting the same code, we can group a block of code together and associate it with one task. Then we can reuse the block of code whenever we need to perform the task again. We achieve this by creating a function. A function is a reusable block of code that groups together a sequence of statements to perform a specific task. So let's have a look at that in code. Let's take a variable, let a equal to 5, let b equal to 3, and let sum equal to a plus b. So if I console log it, I can see the sum is 8. Now, instead of A and B, if I want to make a sum, let C equal to 8 and let D equal to 10, then I'll have to make another variable sum2 and then add them together. And if I console log sum2, it is giving me 8, 18, 8 from here and 18 from here. Now, see here, we are doing the same thing over and over again. But if we use function, we don't have to do any of it. So to create a function, let's first comment them out. To create a function, first we are going to write the keyword function and then going to be the function name. So in this case, let's write the name sum and then is going to be the parameter. So how many numbers do we need for to find the sum? We need two numbers, right? So we can write number 1 and number 2. These are going to be the parameter, then a curly bracket. Now, in this curly bracket, in this number 1 and number 2, we are going to get an addition. So let's write the code logic. Here, I'm going to return number 1 plus number 2. Now let's console log it. Console log the sum. I can see that I'm getting a function sum. Now, just because I get a function doesn't mean it is going to run automatically. We'll have to invoke it. And how do we invoke it? We just call the sum name and call it, not a number. Why nan not a number? Because you see here we have given two parameters, number 1 and number 2. But here, are we giving it anything? No. We have to give it two numbers. Let's say if I gave it 5, that is going to be number 1, and 3. If I give it, then it is giving me the sum 8. If I give, let's just say, another sum, and now I'm going to 8 and 10, I'm getting 8 and 18, so that we don't have to write all of it. We can just write a function and then call that function by giving the parameter or the numbers, and then we can get our desired outcome. So this is how the function works. Now let's learn about parameters and arguments. In JavaScript, function parameters and arguments are important concepts. Parameters are variables listed as part of the function definition. They act as a placeholder for the values that the function will receive when it's invoked. Parameters are declared in the parentheses of a function declaration. So here, these two things are called parameters. Arguments are the actual values passed to the function when it is called. They correspondent to the parameter defined in the function declaration. Arguments are provided within the parentheses of the function call. And here, 5 and 3, 8 and 10 are the arguments. Now let's learn about default parameters. One of the features added in ES6 is the ability to use default parameter. Default parameters allow parameters to have a predetermined value in case there is no argument passed into the function or if the argument is undefined when called. So let's say the number 1, the default value is going to be 5 and I'm not passing anything here. Then what will be the case? Node, then function, it is giving me not a number. If I give 0 and 3, let's see what happens. It is giving me 3. Now let's see if instead of 0, I give undefined, what happens. Now it is giving me 8 because the default parameter here is 5. If I make it 10, then it will give me 13. If I give it 5, then it will give me 15. Now I'm seeing it here because I'm returning something. What happens if I don't return it? If I don't return it, see what happens? It is undefined. So in a function call, we must return something. If I console log it, log number 1, let's see what I get. I get 5, but in return, the function call, I'm getting the undefined. So whenever we are writing a function, we should add something to return it. Now it is giving me our desired outcome. Now let's learn about the concept helper function. We can also use the return value of a function inside another function. This function being called within another function are often referred to as helper function. Now let's take another function, and this function is going to be called even. Function is even, then number. If I write return num by 2, if it is 0, then it is going to be even. Now I'm going to check is even number 1. Number 1 is even. Number 2, number 2 is even. Return number 1, number 2. And let's see what happens. It is giving me 10. Now, it did not give me these two because we are sending 5 and 5 is not even number. So if I give a even number right now, we can see that 2 is even and it is giving me this. So this one is a helper function. I can use that in another function. So this is what is called a helper function. Now let's learn about function expression. Another way to define a function is to use a function expression. To define a function inside an expression, we can use the function keyword. In a function expression, the function name is usually omitted. A function with no name is called an anonymous function. A function expression is often stored in a variable in order to refer to it. So to declare a function expression, Declare a variable to make the name to be name or identifier of your function. Since the release of ES6, it is common practice to use const as the keyword to declare the variable. Assign as the variable's value as an anonymous function created by using the function keyword, followed by a set of parentheses with possible parameters, then a set of curly braces that contain the function body. To invoke a function expression, write the name of the variable in which the function is stored, followed by the parentheses enclosing any arguments being passed into the function. So now let's convert this into a function expression. To do that, remove this name, write a keyword const sum function. That should do it. Now, if I see, it is working as the same as before. All we have to do is just give it a variable and put the function inside that variable. Now let's learn about arrow function. ES6 introduced arrow function syntax, a shorter way to write function by using the special fat arrow notation. Arrow function remove the need to type out keyword function every time you need to create a function. Instead, you first include the parameter inside the bracket and then add an arrow that points to the function body surrounded in curly braces. Now, there are a few things to remember with arrow function. Arrow function has shorter syntax. Arrow function allows us to write function with a more concise syntax, which can improve the readability, especially for small functions. It has lexical this binding. Arrow function lexically bind the value of this. It means that the value of this inside an arrow function is determined by surrounding lexical scope, the scope where the arrow function is defined, rather than how the function is called. This can help to avoid confusion of this in traditional function. And no argument object. Arrow function do not have their own arguments object. Instead, they inherit the arguments object from their parent scope. This can help avoid confusion and potential bugs. So we can say that arrow functions were created to provide a more convenient and expressive way to define functions in JavaScript, especially for scenarios where concise syntax and lexical scope are desired. Now, let's convert this function to an arrow function. To do that, we have to remove the function keyword and then we have to give a arrow here. Now it should work as the same as before. If I clear it and then note, see, it is working as the same. So this is how the arrow function works. We can write the arrow function more concisely as well. Let's just say we have a function that has only one thing to do. It can return only one thing. So let's assume that we are going to take two numbers and that function is going to return us the multiplication of that number. So we can write this const multiply and then number and then number one, number two, and then it will just give me number one multiplied by number two. And now if I multiply 12 and 3, let's see, 36. It is giving me 36. Now, if I have multiple lines of code, then we can write in a curly braces. So if I have to return just one thing, I can write it just like this. So this is an example of concise body arrow function. This concludes our chapter of function.